Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Marketing Association's uh, 2021 first webinar. On, be- on behalf of Marketing Association and the Programs Committee, we are honored to have with us leaders of the industry who will be talking about the digital consumption of the Pakistani consumer. Um, Usually, what we do have in at MAP are team meetings, which are face to face. But due to the current COVID situation and the last 1 year, we have converted this into a webinar. The overall agenda for today is is that we will have a welcome address by the Marketing Association President Masood Hashmi. After that, I will introduce the speakers, and then we'll have a group discussion. Uh, Masood Hashmi, Marketing Association President, thank you for joining us. Over to you, Masood.
Thank you, Amir. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think everybody can hear me. And today's topic is digital consumption of the Pakistani consumer. As President Marketing Association of Pakistan, I welcome all the participants, and especially my speakers and panelists today. It's a really august panel. Let me go through the names of the panelists because they are among the best in the industry. Uh, First is Durdana Achakzai Sahiba. She is Vodafone UK and Karan Das. Akbar Ali Shah Saab, Rakit Binkiza, country manager of Rakit Binkiza. Atifa Asghar Sahiba, TIE and Nokia ex Nokia Singapore. Sardar Abu Bakr Sahab, Mobilink Microfinance Bank. Dr. Aisha Khan Sahiba, Acumen and Bank Al Falah. And our own Amir Pasha Saab, Honorary Secretary MAP, past chief of Gokola, regional head of Visa and Nutshell. So I would formally like to welcome everyone for this webinar. Actually, what we are discussing the consumer consumption of uh, digital consumption in reference to consumers. Look at this whole webinar thing. This is happening because of this phenomena of COVID. And as I think Aswar sent me the numbers today, 175 million mobile users, 65 million internet users, and out of that, 30% is on social media. It's a big market. So I think the digital transformation is happening worldwide. But when we look at Pakistan and worldwide also, I believe it has taken a speed because of accelerated because of COVID, because people could not meet or transact business in person. So our topic is today because as Amir mentioned, we always used to have this team meetings and we invite speakers and they talk to our association and the guests. But these webinars and we are discussing about hybrid conferences and team meetings. So that will also be there. And this whole thing has speed up the process of digital growth and e-commerce. There are new ways to connect with the consumer. The concept is the same. You have to connect with the consumer, you have to tell your story, and you have to find the right environment, the right kind of people, and targeted and demographics and everything. So I personally think that reaching consumer has changed, transacting business has changed, and maybe it was changing. It's not like it has changed because of COVID. It was changing, but it has a speed up. And I was reading somewhere today. It is hard to understand a technological revolution while it is happening, as to know what a hurricane will do while the winds are still going speed. So we don't know what will happen. And as the tech people usually say, that consumers, the people, chronically overestimate what can be done in a year. They generally overestimate this will happen, that will happen, but usually they underestimate what will happen in a decade. So this is happening, and for this year, I can say that overestimation might not be that overestimate, and a lot has happened in this year, and a lot people have lived to uh, a different lifestyle, completely different lifestyle, and on different, of course, for trade and business, it has not been a great year. 220 has been almost a silent kind of year, but I think on many other fronts, the family lives have improved, especially the people like us who are quite busy and traveling and not available to the families. We could read more books, we could sit with our families and have those connections revived, which were either weak or disconnected. So this is happening. And when you go into these transformations or transfer learning happening, because what you are, like what they say, when you are looking for a solution to the problem, sometimes you solve some other problems. So it is very interesting times, and this time will be remembered, and we will see growth and new avenues, I believe, during this time, and we will build on that. And now the vaccine is there, and world will be vaccinated, but it is not easy because still uh, most of the world, in fact 90% is not vaccinated, but at least we have got a hope, and this will happen. So without further ado, I think I will hand it over back to Amir Pasha and listen to all these experts rather than me talking about technology, because I'm just an immigrant and I'm not a native. All the others are native because they were born after 1983, most of them. And I'm an old man, so I could just read from here and there and brag about my knowledge, but I cannot grasp it that well as my children can and my youngsters can. So over to Amir again, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Masood. That's very fair what you said, the transition that we've gone through and how COVID has impacted us and how the new generation is totally adopting and getting into digital. Uh, I'd like to start our session with a brief 5-minute video which captures exactly what is happening today and how the world is adopting to internet digital. So, can we run the video, please?
LO. Two simple letters that marked one of the biggest changes in human history. In 1969, programmers were trying to type login.
Charlie typed the L, he typed the O, he typed the G. You get the G? Wacko. The system crashed. So the very first message on the internet ever was low, as in lo and behold.
50 years later, and half the world is now online. But that half is primarily from the rich world.
Which means that the other half, quite obviously, will have to come from the poor world.
How will the second half of humanity coming online change the internet? And how will the internet change them?
The really interesting place to look at is India. India's internet penetration was pretty low until very recently with the launch of a new mobile network called Reliance Jio. With incredibly cheap phones, incredibly cheap data prices.
Reliance Jio launched aggressively in 2016, offering subsidized handsets and free data to hook people in.
India went from being a relatively expensive place to consume data to being the cheapest in the world. Prices crashed by 94%.
Newer users in the developing world are browsing the internet in much the same way as people in the developed world.
When people get online, the first thing they do is they chat with their friends, they watch sports, they watch movies, they watch music videos, they watch an extremely large amount of pornography.
But this is where the similarities end. The internet was built on the assumptions that many users speak English, are literate, and are media savvy.
None of those things remain true for the second half of the internet. You have a whole bunch of languages that don't enjoy very good support in terms of web browsers or input, and you have a whole bunch of people who can't actually read or write. There's practically no usage of desktop computers, laptop computers. It's almost entirely on mobile phones. And these mobile phones tend not to be the expensive, very powerful ones. They have limited amounts of storage.
This is prompting big tech companies to change the way their products work.
They're having to understand these new behaviors. They're having to fundamentally rethink how they supply their services. For much of the world that is now coming online, text is not the natural way to interact. It's smaller apps that can do more and that can be used with voice or video rather than text.
Many tech giants have already begun to establish themselves in emerging markets. Facebook has over 1.5 billion users in developing countries, and the YouTube channel with the most subscribers is a Bollywood studio and record label. Creating large user bases is one thing, making money from them is another.
The prevailing assumption around making money on the internet until this point has been a largely American assumption of advertising.
99% of Facebook's revenue comes from advertising, as does 85% of Google's. But many people in the developing world are poor, so users don't have the same value to advertisers. Take Facebook's last quarter of 2018.
They make 12 times as much money per user in North America than they do in Asia.
And overall annual revenue from the developing world is much lower too.
Google, for instance, about 46% of their revenues come from the US alone, and only about 15% from Asia.
That 15% includes rich countries like Australia and Japan. Take those away, and the revenue from Asia would be even lower. If the traditional advertising model isn't going to work, tech companies will have to think outside the box.
What people will pay for is the opportunity to express themselves. Until the advent of smartphones, really, a big money spinner for Indian mobile networks was something called a caller ringback tone. I would pick a song that I like very much, and if you were calling me, you would hear it, and I'd pay a monthly fee for that to happen. Now think about exactly what this is. I am paying money for a song I will never listen to, only so that my friends who are calling me can hear it, because I want to express myself. So it'll be lots of novel ideas like that for very, very small amounts of money, but we're talking about lots and lots of people doing these things.
One thing is for sure, the internet's second revolution will change people's lives for the better.
The ability of people around the world to have a good time is becoming a little bit more equal. And that, while hard to pin down in economic data, is a net benefit to just the general well-being of humankind, which can be very easy to understate or to ignore, especially if you're used to those things, but has a really meaningful impact.
Thank you. I think that video very clearly summarized what's happening in the second internet, this part of the world, Pakistan. We had examples of India. Both our markets are very similar. We have low literacy rates, we have language challenges, and most importantly, the affordability factor. Digital adoption and penetration has been the fastest amongst the youth. In a country like Pakistan, where a good 60% of the population is below the age of 30, which basically means that 60 million users, we have got 130 million users below the age of 30, of which a good 60 million are between 15 to 30 years. Now, digital adoption has been primarily driven by the penetration of mobile in emerging markets like Pakistan. Latest statistics from the PTA shows that we've got 180 million subscribers, of which 90 million subscribers have access to 3G. Smartphone penetration is growing rapidly, and estimates are that close to 20% of total mobile subscribers have a smartphone. When we look at digital consumption, what are our Pakistani consumers actually doing on the digital front? They are actually using social media extensively. The most popular being Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Uh, this is the background of what we have seen is happening. And I think it is time now for us to reach out to our panelists, which extend from across the industries. So we will hear from them as what is happening in their, how they are adopting to the digital communication and adoption of their consumers in the FMCG sectors, in the telco sectors, in the financial services sectors, and the social development sectors. Once we hear from them, we will break out into a group discussion whereby we will be discussing the emerging trends that's happening, what they are seeing. Together, we can talk about that. What is the cultural impact of social media in Pakistan? And last but not least, what does the future hold for us? So we will hear from the panelists what the future holds for us. First on the panel is Akbar Ali Shah. If I may ask Akbar to join us. Assalamualaikum, Akbar. Thanks, thanks for joining us. Akbar has over 20 years of experience in the FMCG world. He is currently the CEO of Reckitt Benckiser Hygiene. Actually, I should be saying Reckitt now. That's your new name, right? Of the company.
That's right.
Just a couple of days ago, you launched with a big bang.
That's right, Amr.
Yeah, so Akbar not only having extensive experience in the FMCG world with Reckitt and Unilever, he is also a graduate of IBA and has worked across Pakistan and the Middle East. He is very socially active and is also advisor board on the Saaf Sehat Pakistan. Over to you, Akbar.
Thank you, Amr. Thank you, Masood Saab, and thank you very much, Marketing Association of Pakistan. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first start off by acknowledging and appreciating Amr for setting up a nice panel. It's not only cross-functional, but you also ensured the gender balance, not something very common that I see in webinars or conferences. So, 100 out of 100 from my side on this.
Thank you.
And you shared a lot of interesting facts. Now, let me just build on some of the facts that you shared. I'll add a few more. You mentioned around 3G, 4G penetration in Pakistan. So in the last 4 years, what has happened is that there are now 40 to 50 million more subscribers, 3G, 4G subscribers, which have been added in just last 4 years, which means 2016 to 2020. Now, 40 million subscribers means, it's like a whole city of Karachi, Lahore, Rawalpindi, Islamabad put together. Now, this is now the new community, and this new community has just joined in the last 4 years, taking an overall number to around 95 million. Now, if you look at this number, 95 million, this is more than the total population of GCC countries. This is huge. This is something that has happened in the last 4 years subtly. And therefore, there is a need to look into it. What has Masood Saab mentioned about a storm, about a hurricane? It is not less than that, and we as leaders can see what's going to happen in the coming years, 4 years, 5 years down the road, how it's going to reshape some of the industry practices, some of the businesses. And we are, very much into it to navigate through this storm and hurricane. What is also interesting is that it's not only a subscription that has gone up, but the usage of the data usage. If you look at the data, while the subscriptions were going up, doubling in the last 4 years, the data usage has been doubling every year. And this is where it becomes very interesting. It means not only new people are joining, but people who are already using it, they are doubling their consumption year on year. And this is where it has started becoming extremely interesting for everyone. So when they are spending more, consuming more data, what are they really consuming on? Masood Saab mentioned about this webinar, how we are conducting now. Precisely, this is how the overall life has changed in the last few years, even pre-COVID and post-COVID more so. The way students are taking their lessons, attending schools, attending colleges, universities, lectures, it has changed. They're using technology today. Even a 5-year-old, nobody could have expected a 5-year-old would be connected and sitting silently and attending the class online. But that has started happening. It is happening right in front of us. The way patients are approaching doctors, consulting doctors online, it's also happening today. And more and more people are getting prescriptions online, and then it's not only consulting doctors, they're getting their lab test results online. They're going less and less frequently to the hospitals or to the labs for unnecessary stuff, but things that they can leverage technology on, they're using it, which opens up a lot of health tech sort of opportunities. And then if you look at the way we are shopping, the way we are ordering our favorite food, ordering medicines, or even buying groceries, that is also changing radically in COVID world. It has changed everywhere. In the US, around 50% of people used online grocery in the last 1 year. That's 50%, half of the population using online and e-commerce. Similarly, if you look at how we are transacting, how we are banking, how we are making use of digital wallets, how we paying salaries, receiving or transferring funds, or how the distributors are paying to customers, and customers are paying to the organizations. It's all changing. We have seen massive surge on online transactions. Online banking has seen a surge. The fellow panel members can also share and shed some light on it. What then is worth looking at is that when you're spending a lot of time, how does it compare with a conventional TV? It's very interesting. The fact remains that still the TV penetration remains phenomenally high. It has a very high penetration. Though the digital penetration is now up to around 40%. But when you look at the people who have access to 3G, 4G, and have access to TV, how much time are they spending on TV and how much are they spending on online? What we have noticed is that during weekdays, on an average, the average time used to watch TV was around an hour and 25 minutes. That's during the weekdays. And then on the weekend, it becomes 3 hours every Saturday and Sunday. When it comes to digital, we've seen that during weekdays, this digital media consumption is around 2x of TV. While on the weekends, it's more or less the same as TV. So if I just cumulate it on a weekly basis, we are talking about around 17 hours spent on internet and around 12 hours spent on TV. So clearly, people who have access to internet, 3G, 4G, they're spending more time on internet. What are they spending their time on? If you look at, further drill it down, we see that they're basically streaming videos, music. That's what is happening. We've seen the second biggest usage is social networking. Third one is emails, then followed by search, news, and then the education. And that's how the flow is. Now, regardless of whatever they're doing, they're leaving digital footprints, which is allowing marketeers, businesses to customize their offerings to these consumers, and which is opening a lot of opportunities. And that's where the hurricane and storm is. What is worth looking at, you mentioned about the second wave or the second generation of internet. What we can see in Pakistan today is when it comes to awareness and when it comes to consideration, those part of digital marketing, functions, we see there is a lot more relevance. You can create awareness, customize it. You can create a lot of, you can evaluate consideration sets. But when it comes to consumption or conversions, there is a lot of offline work which is happening. So still around 4 to 5% consumers are buying online, and 95% are still buying offline. And it is, there are many factors why it is happening. But that is still, it doesn't mean that everyone is using online, so therefore everyone is buying online as well. So there is still a journey out there. It's a whole ecosystem which is developing gradually, but it's bound to change. Amen.
Amazing insights, Akbar. Great learnings. I think I mean, a lot of data that you've shared with us. I think the key difference from what you're doing, what you're sharing, is that just the mere fact that people are going digital, that means they're leaving a footprint. So no
That's right.
longer do you have to wait for long researches that used to be the tradition. एक दो महीने लग जाते जब तक रिसर्च होती, फील्ड वर्क होता आता. अब तो सब इंफॉर्मेशन हमारे पास on our fingertips है, which is really, really powerful. And we can then customize our messaging and communication to our consumers through their digital consumption habits.
Ahmed Saab, here I would just add something more to it. I think what Masood Saab also mentioned, there's a tendency of techies to overestimate over a year. So I agree, because I think it's a fine balance that the leaders have to manage. There is an existing model which is proven, which is based on 50 years of learnings. It is getting disrupted. There's no question about it. The scale of that disruption varies. The substitute model is still not very robust. It is going through a lot of changes, and therefore large businesses have to be very wise when they are making a transition. They need to learn fast, adopt fast, allow those youngsters to experiment. And as soon as they can do that, they'll have a prototype, and then they start substituting, and that's where the transition will happen and will accelerate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Akbar, for sharing it. And then during our group discussion at the end, we'll further explore it and see the implications. Thank you so much, Akbar.
Thank you.
Can we ask Atifa to join us, please?
Hi, Amir. First of all, can you
Hi,
hear me and
Atifa,
see me?
Yes. I hope the technical issues have been sorted out.
I hope so
we
too. I
we've
hope
been
so
trying
too.
to do
Yeah.
that. So let me introduce Atifa. Atifa has over 20 plus years of corporate work experience in sales, marketing, business development, communications. She's been in both Pakistan and overseas. Recently, she was in Singapore with Nokia, but her whole experience is in the marketing space, in the communication space, and in engagement with the consumers. Presently, she's back in Pakistan, and I believe you've joined the board of Indus Entrepreneurs. So, really excited and curious to hear from you how you see the Pakistani consumer emerging, and how you compare it to what you have seen when in other emerging markets like Pakistan. Over to you, Atifa.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you. And thank you, Marketing Association of Pakistan, for this opportunity. As Akbar was mentioning, and he very rightly pointed out, that the consumers in Pakistan have become a little bit more savvy than they were previously. And especially, as he said, in the last 4 years, we've seen in Pakistan a huge number of not only subscribers adding on to the overall bandwagon, but they're also using and consuming a lot of data as well. So since the consumers are moving on the digital space, what I've also seen is that, and here in Pakistan as well, especially, that businesses also started to go digital as well. I know for large corporations, it tends to become a little difficult to go digital all the way, but then since if your consumers in the digital space, then they have no choice but to go in that direction. However, for small businesses or SMEs as well, I see a lot of different and agile business models coming up, which are very, very highly dependent on online business models. One thing that Amir, I've seen and I've felt is that even though the number of subscribers in Pakistan has been increasing quite steadily over the past few years, and even the data consumption has been going up as well. But one thing that this pandemic, since the past 1 year, that the whole world is facing, what it has also done is that it has accelerated that data consumption as well. And it's similar for Pakistan as well. Although I know कि अभी आप अगर पाकिस्तान में देखें तो उतना लगता नहीं है कि pandemic situation है कि कहीं जगह lockdowns हैं, कहीं जगह lockdowns नहीं है. But outside of Pakistan, and I'm sure that Dana, when she comes on as well, she'll tell you that it's a similar situation in Europe as well. So when everything moved from outdoor to the indoor, so the businesses had no choice, and this was not just in Pakistan, but outside in Pakistan as well, to go digital, to go online, because your consumer was confined in a limited space, and in that limited space they were forced or they were compelled to do, have their online education. Even their socializing became online, their shopping. Previously the shopping arena, I would say, just the online shopping was generally around your luxury goods or your clothes and shoes, but the grocery part was never, especially here in Pakistan as well, it was never an online thing. So that moved to online as well. So what you started seeing was that there were a lot of online digital verticals from a business perspective cropping up all over the place. And that was mostly driven because of the fact that now you had a consumer who was confined in a space and they were just had to do everything that needed to be done. So the digital consumption did accelerate all across the world and in part of the world where I was also last year. But what I feel the difference between that part of the world and Pakistan was the difference in delivery of, the quality of the delivery. And what I mean by that is that the technology infrastructure that you have in other parts of the world, which are much more robust and much more resilient than what you have in Pakistan. And I was very grateful. I mean, I was just, quite frankly speaking, last year when I was sitting outside of Pakistan, I was like, शुक्र है पाकिस्तान में 4G आ गया था, वरना पेंडेमिक के सिचुएशन में ये जो हमारी सारी ऑनलाइन कंज्यूमर कंजम्पशन एंड इवन फ्रॉम अ बिजनेस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू बहुत मुश्किल होता लोगों को जो है टू कैरी आउट देयर डे टू डे वर्क. So from a technology infrastructure point of view as well, there's a little bit more resilience and I would say robustness. And then what happened was consumer outside, of course, is much more tech savvy. They have a higher degree of awareness and adoption to digital, whether it's their online grocery, online education, the online payment stuff. But I feel that in Pakistan as well, this thing has even in the past 1 year, if you look at the data, I'm pretty sure that the rate of growth in 2020 was much higher than what would have been in the previous years as well, because people had no choice but to go digital and be online for all of their basic needs as well. I mean, everything went online. So yeah, those were some of the differences that we felt. And another very interesting anecdote I will share is that when everything moved from outdoor to indoor, fixed broadband all of a sudden came into the limelight. I mean, previously it was all about mobile broadband, and a lot of focus was on improving the infrastructure of the mobile broadband because the consumers wanted their content or their data on the go, right? So people were moving around, and mobile phones uh, became their wallets, became their screens for watching cricket matches, of movies, and stuff like that. So once they went back into the house, the fixed infrastructure again came into the limelight. And I saw in that part of the world that I'm coming from, mostly in the ASEAN countries and in countries like Australia and Japan as well, the operators over there started focusing more on enhancing their fixed broadband offerings as well, because when you're sitting at home and all you're doing is, everything is online, then it's very important to have that right infrastructure in place to enable the consumers as well and the businesses as well. I'm gonna take a pause here, Amir, and see if you've got anything to say on that.
No, that's great, Atifa, to bring the comparison between what is happening in other markets and Pakistan. And you're absolutely correct कि अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह कोविड जो है पाकिस्तान में वो जो इम्पैक्ट आया है दूसरे ममालिक में वो पाकिस्तान में नहीं आया है. And alhamdulillah, our consumers have been protected from the how critical and how deadly this could have been. And whilst, like you're saying, that the consumption patterns have increased, and we have gone, COVID has been an accelerator, like you're saying. So people have adopted digital.
And businesses have gone digital as well. Not just people, businesses have also gone digital as well.
Businesses have gone digital as well.
The ones who could afford to go digital, they went digital. And I think the rest are following suit as well, because that's what the direction is.
So I think in a way, I think it will be interesting to see what the new norm will be post-COVID. both for businesses and for consumers. How much whilst we've gone up, whether the next level will be higher. And I'm pretty confident. I think people hesitation has gone down. So things that would have normally taken what people expected to take in 5 to 10 years has really taken place at a much shorter period of time. So
No, I agree.
we
I agree with you on
will
that, Amar,
further
because I
discuss
think,
that
yeah.
with the team later in the conversation. I would like
Okay.
to thank you once again, Atifa. I'd like to invite Aisha. Assalamualaikum, Aisha.
Assalamu alaikum, Amir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Good to have you on. Aisha needs no introduction, but anyway, for the viewers out there, Dr. Aisha is the country director of Acumen. She has been working both in Pakistan and overseas. She is Pakistan's first doctor from Harvard Business School. She she is at the same time on the board of Bank Al-Falah. She has with her what we're looking at hearing from Aisha is her experience dealing with social enterprises, governments, businesses, and communities. How you have seen digital consumer, how are you seeing digital consumption being picked up across the board, not just in our niche market. So over to you, Aisha. We'd love to hear your perspective.
Thank you, Amir.
Sorry, Aisha, I think there is some issue with the audio.
Yes, in the world of digital, we we were talking about digital. Technology does play a big role. So I think, like we always said, the greatest enabler is technology. So whilst we wait for Aisha and the team to fix their technological issues, I think let's use this time also to really understand that if I were to combine what Akbar and Atifa were saying, my perception is that I think we as marketers and businesses, in our minds, we look at offline and online in a very data-driven, statistical way, whereas the consumer doesn't look at the world as digital, online, offline. It's a hybrid world. They're still doing their normal behavioral activities, and at times they're in the digital world, and at times they're in the real world. So I think we need to be cognizant of that. That consumers के लिए मेरे ख्याल में ये hard cut distinction नहीं है. And I think what you were saying, Akbar and Atifa, also, today you would go to the store, you would actually physically see the car, or you physically see an electronic item. And I know this takes place out in the West. कि आपने मोबाइल फोन देखा, आपने उसको उठाया, देखा, टच किया, फील किया, टेस्ट किया, उसके बाद आप ऑनलाइन स्टोर पे चले गए, Amazon पे चले गए, and you get the best deal. So nobody is going to just stick with digital or online only. And retailers are also now merging the two and creating that environment and that experience. So it's all about the experience for the consumer, which is evolving. I see we've got Aisha back. All the
Hi,
technical
can you
problems
guys
resorted.
see and hear me now? I was just trying to figure out, it's very poetic that on digital, I'm having so many issues. So my apologies, everyone. I hope you can see me and hear me now. Yes?
Yes, very much. Yeah.
Please Please, Aisha, we can hear you.
Yes, loud and clear, Aisha.
We could, and you're frozen again. This is about in a digital discussion, technology is not supporting us. So whilst we wait for Aisha, Akbar, you were saying something.
Yeah, so Amir, I was talking, I mean, what you're pointing out is basically the customer journey. So the customer journey varies, so whether they consider the product or they evaluate the products in the store, in a physical store, and then place an order online, or they actually start evaluating it and start reading about it online, and then they actually see it physically, offline. So what is interesting to see is to get the unique, customer view, and that unique customer view requires you to link the online offline journey, and which is now very interesting one, because you see, as I was mentioning earlier, 95% of consumers in consumer goods industry, they're still buying in Pakistan, they're still buying offline. It doesn't mean that they are they are getting updates or getting awareness through TV, possibly, but
Exactly.
then there's a 40% of them are connected with 3G, 4G, so they're getting their news feed online, they're getting reviews online, they are consulting their peers or community about certain services offering online, they're making up their mind online, advocacy online, but they may go offline and shop. So therefore, how do you ensure that the brand that you're offering online and offline gives the same experience? And then it's also unique offering to that particular unique customer. And that is, the refinedness which is needed now in the years to come. Because it's no more just online or offline. It's about the hybrid omni-channel model.
But that is really the crux, Akbar, that I think the speed at which we marketers have to learn and unlearn is exponential. So, Philip Kotler, all of the old guys, the fundamentals remain the same, but our executions and the speed at which we have to mirror our consumers, I think that is really a step change that is required. So right, what you're saying. Keeping in mind the technology issues that we're having, maybe we could just bring forward Durdana if Durdana is there, and in the meantime, Aisha's technical issues can be sorted out. Hi, Durdana. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Hi, everyone.
We have Durdana with us. Durdana is actually in London right now, and so she's. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Durdana has with us both exposure in Pakistan and overseas. She's group executive director at Akim at Vodafone, and she's been working with global markets in making sure that the digital agenda is being executed across the world and in Europe. But whilst in Pakistan, she was also the chief digital officer for Telenor. So and she's on the board of Karandas. Without me taking any more time, over to you, Durdana.
Thanks, Amir. And I gather that I've got 5 minutes, so I'll try and address the points that have not been covered so far, and then bring another angle to the discussion. So, like the speakers before me rightly pointed out, definitely, COVID has accelerated digital in ways that I personally, as a chief digital officer, could only have dreamt of in the past. So therefore, it was an unexpected and surprise ally. And although I deeply wish it wasn't COVID, but it did accelerate digital transformation in ways that no one imagined. So just to build on some of the examples that were given from my perspective, and I'm sure others would be aware, Disney Plus, when they launched their channel, they achieved 60 million subscribers in 6 months. And this was initially going to be in their plans for for the next 5 years, but they were able to achieve that kind of growth just in 6 months because of COVID. Then Netflix, which I'm sure many of you might be consuming on a personal perspective as well, grew 52% in the first 6 months of COVID. And from the example of where I work, Vodafone, we saw a 50% increase in how our customers were engaging with our digital assets. Like in any situation, in this situation too, there have been winners and losers, right? So companies and businesses that were already ahead in terms of having invested in the right platforms and technologies, or at least having digital and technology as a serious agenda, I think really benefited from the early demand, and therefore were able to gain momentum on that. And those that didn't, I think there are many examples here from where I'm sitting. Businesses have started vanishing. Then, as Atifa was saying, I think it's COVID has brought the convergence angle for telecom players in a very interesting way, right? So it's no longer mobile first, which is kind of like the crown jewel of most telcos, but fixed broadband achieved a kind of prominence that wasn't always there. And then in providing these connectivity services to the masses, I think telcos have become center stage in a way, again, that was unimaginable before COVID. And therefore, the services were no longer just for profit, expanding businesses, but as in many different governments and rightly so, in many different countries and rightly so, Vodafone, for example, gave a lot of free facilitation and broadband to nurses and NHS, for example, zero rating education, right? So apps that were education based, such that in lockdowns, when schools have gone online so many times, different parts of the different segments of the population don't have to feel that additional squeeze. Then somebody also mentioned, I think it was you, Amir, how personalization and contextualization is just the expected thing now, right? Because there's so much data, the digital footprint and all that. I would throw in another angle to that, right? So, and especially for a country like Pakistan, where maybe policies and regulations around privacy and data usage are not as advanced, but I suspect they would catch up, right? Whereas GDPR is very much here in Europe. I think, and I think Singapore has also adopted the framework. I imagine because of how the reciprocity works, many countries will have to catch up. Otherwise, they would exclude themselves with any kind of partnerships with European or even, American businesses. So from that angle, I would welcome us to think maybe this is what we can discuss in the roundtable as well, is that what does this boost in acceleration, the proliferation of consumer insights and data, what does that mean for different stakeholders, right? And for me personally, I think as leaders of corporations and businesses, and hopefully as leaders in the government as well, I think it's time to really think through what responsibility we have to the countries that we serve, to the populations, to the consumers that we serve, in terms of privacy, in terms of data rights and ownership, but also then beyond that, right? What role do different stakeholders play in really educating the consumers in Pakistan, for example, which I think Atifa commented are becoming more savvy. But are they really savvy enough, or is any consumer really savvy enough to differentiate fake news from non-fake news? Deep fake, for example, I don't know if you saw how deep fake recently has generated a lot of content. So I would love us to think a bit along those lines as well, because those are the hard conversations around, yes, it's legal, but is all of it necessarily ethical? And then, yes, again, in the Pakistani context, one last point I'd make is that whilst smartphones are increasing, Pakistan is still a predominantly feature phone market, isn't it? At least from the last time I remember. Therefore, I think it's an important responsibility of not just telco players, but all businesses to ensure that we play a role in graduating the masses into digital consumption in a responsible way, designing inclusive technologies that don't exclude, I guess, the illiterate, the base of the pyramid farmer, or kind of specifically small business owners as well. So I would love to touch on these points in the roundtable as well. I hope I've done okay for time.
You were well within your time, Durdana. A lot to absorb, a lot to digest, but really to the point. And yes, it is indeed a challenge. It is indeed a challenge for us to deal with fake news, as you call it, or deep fake. Um, and I think a lot of us have experienced this. कि खबर जो घूमती है टिकटॉक के ऊपर, फेसबुक के ऊपर, व्हाट्सएप के ऊपर स्पेशली देखे बगैर, सोचे बगैर, आई एम गिल्टी ऑफ दैट कि हम बस फॉरवर्ड कर देते हैं and without really verifying. And I've now personally started really looking कि भाई इसका source क्या है. And it might sound funny. I think many times हम लोग common sense को भूल जाते हैं. Or we're so anxious to be the first one to share that and forward it कि हम verify भी नहीं करते हैं कि ये sense बन रहा है, इसमें कोई angle है, ये क्या है. Yes, so that is there, of course. And the infrastructure for sure, जैसे आपने कहा था कि 2G predominantly है, लेकिन हम 3G के अंदर जा रहे हैं. Benefits, I look at technology. You're right, is the democratization. It empowers the masses. Financial inclusion is through technology, through digital. We have tech. We have education through digital. Exactly what you just now said. You just now shared the immense growth of 50 plus during the COVID period. So I think there is a lot that Pakistan is at the tipping point, and I think it just makes sense from what we're discussing right now. If I may be allowed to call Sardar Abu Bakr on, and then Aisha, if you don't mind, then I'll call you later because we're talking about Sardar, who was in the.
We can hear you, Amir.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for Sardar. I can't see him. I can hear myself, but I can't see Abu Bakr. So it's very difficult for me to introduce somebody that we don't have online.
I think it's a connection issue there as well.
In case we are struggling with Sardar.
I think in defense of my fellow colleagues sitting in Islamabad, I think there's generally a connection issue going on in Islamabad at the moment because I'm also logged in through my mobile phone, direct data, not Wi-Fi.
So can we? Is Aisha available? Has Aisha's technical issues been sorted out? You're right, Atifa. Islamabad is.
Islamabad is facing technical issues right now. Islamabad uske मुज़ाफ़ात में इस वक्त जो है. Yeah. Because I had also had to switch to mobile data on my mobile phone in order to come online.
Yeah. So why don't we
can continue with the conversation.
We can have a conversation amongst all of us. So
I was thinking because this is Marketing Association of Pakistan, and marketing is an important has to be an important topic of digital, right? One of the things that's happening is the death of third-party cookies and what that means for different companies, different businesses, and their personalization agenda. So, in other words, I think some of the free riding that was available to all businesses is not going to be there. Therefore, businesses of all sizes need to think about how they can continue to capture that data in a responsible and compliant way, but also then what strategies can they adopt in a non-cookie world to continue to cater to a very hungry and demanding digital consumer? I don't know, Akbar, if from your business.
So I think Dardana, thank you very much for pointing out the GDPR. There is a serious issue here, and when it comes to data privacy laws, and I think it's just a matter of time. It's going to happen, and there will be, I think fundamentally the GDPR will become, let's say, the playbook, and then we can customize it, or maybe there's a roadmap which we'll come up with. But there is definitely a roadmap there. Needs to be a roadmap there. What I can share is, look, we being a UK-based MNC, wherever we are operating, we are obliged to follow GDPR. And therefore, as an organization, we are very much clear in terms of our code of conduct and what kind of data are we collecting. Is there a consent? Are they aware? And then the second point that you mentioned is around the third party and the death of cookie. So I think we in Pakistan is still at a stage where the first party data, because we are generating so much data and we were not using it. So we are still in wave one where the first party data is good enough, and let's learn and let's make use of that. So I think it's not going to impact marketeers in Pakistan, because I think we were not that advanced. And yes, we have the luxury of using, not API,
I
but
had disconnected. I'm trying to get back on.
You are very much, Amir, you're back.
Okay.
So we were discussing the GDPR
in your absence. Go ahead.
Okay. It's like cricket, one more down. So anyways, I think we'll wait for Ahmed to also join back. But look, we would be very happy to take part of any kind of PR conversation or a movement where we could protect our consumers, and they should know what kind of data is being collected, how it's being used. And this, I think it's a right moment before the industry takes over the digital world. I think we are at a right stage where we can leapfrog some of the phases that EU has gone through.
No, great. Abu Bakr, you're here now, but we've lost Amir, have we?
Yeah, the challenges of the digital world, I suppose.
So I think meanwhile, we'll hear.
Oh, there, Amir,
please.
You're back.
Yeah,
And you're gone. So Akbar, it's interesting. What you're saying is that Reckitt in Pakistan is already complying, despite that there not being a requirement in the jurisdiction, but because it's a multinational and to allow that cross-border exchange, you have to kind of follow those rules, because it is going to be a requirement in the near future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Pakistan will eventually have to have a similar framework as well. Yeah.
And I think, Durdana, Atifa, that we, as there is overseas investors chamber of commerce, which most of the MNCs are part of. We can play a role in terms of advising, suggesting, if there is anything required. But there is definitely a need to, and it's not just the digital data, but it's also the data privacy. So I think the level one has also not been done there.
Yeah.
The other point,
and I think eventually it needs to be addressed anyways, because sooner or later, Zardana is saying that Pakistan is going to get caught up in that, and they need to be ready for it. And the policies and the regulations need to start looking into these areas, because everywhere in the world it's being adopted. And I'm sure once the level playing field is the same everywhere else, Pakistan will have no choice but to give it a serious thought. And I think it also boils down to an individual's rights as well, when it comes down to it, rights for privacy.
So Atifa, given your deep experience in the telco world, What do what do you think? And I'm always intrigued by how we can still help the feature phone consumer in a very digital world, right? And it takes me back to the time where when you and I were co-workers, we were still experimenting with a lot of quote unquote digital services, but not necessarily on digital platforms. So maybe digital from either a platform perspective, but not from the user side, or vice versa. So that maybe Abu Bakr has, I'm sure, has plenty to add in that case, both from the different telecoms.
Abu Bakr, we can see you as
पहले ये
well.
बताएं आवाज आ रही है नहीं आ रही?
बिल्कुल loud and clear आ रही है.
Finally, Abu Bakr, good to see you. Without further introductions, Sardar, over to you.
Yeah, as we can see, we've got a long way to go before digital truly works, right? So I'm not going to repeat the messages that have been shared, but just a couple of tips for marketers, organizations, and the government. So for the marketers first and foremost, COVID की वजह से digital consumption तो बढ़ गई. अब जब COVID खत्म हो जाएगा तो फिर क्या करेंगे? Have we really made sure that the customer journeys and the customer experience is embedded and sustainable in a way that customers will choose digital as a mode of operation once this pandemic ends? How much thought is going into ensuring in our marketing departments that we now come up with better journeys and we start thinking of digital beyond an app? अच्छा, इस दौर में ये भी बड़ा हुआ ना आमिर कि जब डिजिटल की बात करते सबने कहा यार हमने ऐप लॉन्च कर दिया. अब आधे से ज्यादा इदारे समझते हैं कि वो डिजिटल हो गए क्योंकि उनकी एक ऐप है. वो अलग एक बात है, ऐप चलती नहीं है, लेकिन एट द सेम टाइम द होल बैक एंड प्रोसेसेस that are connected to the app may still be manual, bureaucratic, full of red tapeism. And I think that's something that we need to crack. I think Durdana touched upon it, that in Pakistan, we have a large feature phone base. More than half of Pakistanis don't have access to smartphones at the moment. तो क्या हम उनको डिजिटल सर्विसेज नहीं दे सकते? अब किसी के पास स्मार्टफोन अगर नहीं है तो does digital truly have to mean something very, very complicated and scientific? How about USSD? जो आपका USSD short codes होते हैं, people are experts in dialing those, subscribing to data packages, subscribing to other services. How about IVR? We hear Google and others with Siri and everything else. A voice recognition service, जहाँ पे आजकल हम सिर्फ call centers में use करते हैं, but a voice recognition service can be used to reach feature phone audiences and actually allow them to buy and sell essential services. So I think for us as marketers, it's about going beyond the cliches, going beyond just having an app. And I think really, really taking a customer perspective. And I think that's my second point. जब डिजिटल की बात करते हैं ना, हम अक्सर तो हम टेक्नोलॉजी की बात करते हैं, हम यूज केसेस की बात नहीं करते, हम कस्टमर जर्नी की बात नहीं करते. एंड आई थिंक दैट्स अ मिस. Kodak had one of the earliest rights to the digital camera. क्या किया उन्होंने उसके साथ? कुछ नहीं किया. Because technology से लेके कुछ नहीं होगा until and unless you have the business perspective, you have the use cases that go with that technology to serve respective market needs. And I think this is where we have a real opportunity now. We cannot just wait for this menace, this pandemic to end before we actually start taking that customer approach where customers see value in digital today. अगर मैं थोड़ी सी candid बात करूँ आमिर, controversial as well, कितना पैसे लोग बनाते हैं डिजिटल से? अगर डिस्काउंट ना दें ऑनलाइन तो कितनी शॉपिंग होती है of a high quality nature online? We need to be much better in the way we engage customers. All of these numbers that we see in these COVID times, yes, you've seen a spike. It will settle at a higher number, but it will come down until and unless we have the right approach to it. अच्छा, उसके लिए हमें एक दो चीजें जरूरी है. एक जरूरी ये है कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में ना हम एक ग्रुप्स बना लेते हैं, अभी एलियनेशन बना लेते हैं. हम कहते हैं यार ये लोग डिजिटल है और ये लोग नॉन डिजिटल है, ये तो फारिग हो गए. If you really want to drive digital in the core business, there has to be a culture of inclusion. You need to make sure that you motivate your team members to an extent जहाँ पे उनकी upskilling becomes something they want to do, where they want to acquire new skills. I think that's really, really key. The second thing is, because this is set up by the Marketing Association of Pakistan, we have to be wary of what I call Amir digital quacks. Digital quacks ये है यार आमिर के एक एजेंसी आई एक क्लाइंट के पास और कहते यार हम आपका डिजिटल फुटप्रिंट बेहतरीन कर देंगे, हम आपके लिए इतने इंप्रेशंस क्रिएट करेंगे, इतने क्लिक थ्रूज क्रिएट करेंगे, इतने लाइक्स क्रिएट करेंगे. What does that mean for the business? Let's start as marketers speaking in a language that others can understand. Let's start speaking in a language which generates a return on investment. If you want digital to be sustainable, चाहे वो FMCG है, चाहे वो बैंकिंग है, चाहे वो टेलको है या कोई और सेक्टर है, आई थिंक दो चीजें जरूर पूछनी चाहिए आमिर. एक ये पूछना चाहिए कि हम डिजिटल ऑन बोर्डिंग के लिए कितना पैसा खर्च करते हैं टू बाय अ कस्टमर, कितने कमीशंस देते हैं टू एक्चुअली बाय कस्टमर्स. द सेकंड थिंग वी नीड टू आस्क इज द रिटेंशन रेट्स. If someone is coming on a digital app, a digital platform, or an IVR service, are they going to dial away 3 months later because we haven't offered them discounts? अगर ये दो चीजें ऐसी हैं of the retention rate and the cost of acquisition that smart marketers need to have an eye on, and that really differentiates in my mind, Amir, digital talent. You will find digital talent that is cognizant of these facts. And then you will find digital talent that is not cognizant of these facts, and they will say to organizations, you know what, look at Facebook, look at WhatsApp. They've lost money for 10 years. And those kind of people will want your organizations to lose money for the next 10 years as well. So it's important to differentiate it. एक और point मैं जरूर कहूँगा, Amir, I know because we're running late. There is a huge benefit of digital services on government services, on government functioning. In these COVID times, we've seen that digital channels have been used for disbursements from the government, SARS program ke zariye. Yes, there is always a physical leg to it because physical is not going to go away. We shouldn't be under any illusions that the physical network is going to disappear. It's not. Even Amazon is opening brick and mortar stores. Uski apni ek value rahegi. But the essential services that the government can provide in terms of reaching people in far-flung areas with financial flows through distributors, through mobile wallets, through offering digital education services, through now digital health and digital insurance services, I think that's immense. I truly believe that we're just scratching the surface, Amir. तो इसलिए मेरे नज़दीक ना यार, to summarize, दो तीन चीज़ें ज़रूरी हैं. एक तो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के लिए बड़ा ज़रूरी है कि टेक्नोलॉजी पर्सपेक्टिव ना लें, कस्टमर पर्सपेक्टिव लें, नंबर 1. नंबर 2, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस में डिजिटल डिवाइड ना क्रिएट करें. ये ना करें यार आप अच्छे हो, आप तो गए, you're a goner. Make sure that you create a culture where upskilling becomes key, and then be wary of digital quacks. The people who are going to bleed organizations dry and into bankruptcy because they are offering products that customers don't want. If you don't offer discounts, the churn is so very high. If you don't offer commissions to buy customers, no customer comes on board. Be wary of those people. And then last point, I think we can go up a notch in terms of leveraging digital for essential government services. I think that's a huge opportunity. अब असल मजा आएगा आमिर जब ये पैंडेमिक खत्म होगा ना, then we will be able to differentiate organizations that have taken sustainable positions in customer facing digitization versus the ones that were just flag bearers of launching more and more apps.
Thanks, Abu Bakr. Thanks, Sardar. I think very pointed statements and observations and insights that you have shared. Yes, I mean, quite frankly, what you've said is, as marketers sitting here from the Marketing Association's perspective, we cannot forget the consumer. We cannot forget the customer. At the end of the day, digital is just a means to an end of how we're reaching our consumers. Our consumers, if they choose to be on the digital platforms doing digital, then we're with them. But that's very cognizant of what you said. Focus on the customer, not just on the technology. There's a lot of food for thought. When we have our group discussion, we will certainly take that further. I hope that Aisha is still with us and can join us. लेकिन जब तक आयशा ज्वाइन करती हैं, तो एक चीज तो है कि I'm sorry, Aisha, once again there's some trouble hearing you. In any case, whilst Aisha's technical issues are fixed, I think we can start the discussion here. So, each one of you have given a very good summary of how digital and the Pakistani consumer are adopting digital. And I think something that is common for all of you have said is that at the heart of it is the Pakistani consumer, is the customer at hand. And very much what was said is that the customer is now open to experiment with digital. And if we can truly keep on understanding our consumer, our customer, using digital, great. If they're using, if like Akbar said, that they're still out in the market, so we cannot ignore that, where their decision making is doing, where we can influence them there. Dudana rightly said that, at the same time, whilst we're getting excited about digital, we have to keep in mind that the infrastructure has to be there. There's data privacy issues. All of that is still going on. And Atifa, you also said that business to business suddenly realized that now they can't be in the office. They have to do business to business transaction on the digital means. The question that I have to all of you is that based on this, what do you think we as marketeers, how do we move forward? What are the trends that we have to be aware of? I know, Abu Bakr, you just now said that we have to remain customer centric. Let's take that thought and move forward. What does it mean to be customer centric in a digital world where consumers and our Pakistani consumers are slowly, or accelerated because of COVID, adopting digital as a means?
For me, Amir, it is definitely going towards hyper personalization. And that is driven both by, like Akbar was saying earlier, data that businesses and corporations own themselves, but also how it is enriched by different third-party data as well as contextual data. AI will become mainstream, I think, in a decade or so in the marketing world. Already, the digital or the tech-native organizations are using AI and machine learning to market to us on Facebook and Google and whatnot. But I think traditional businesses will also increasingly adopt it, just because without doing that, they will not be able to reach the scale, and they will simply not be able to keep up to consumer expectations. Because listen, the consumer expectations are shaped up by the trends that are primarily driven by the big tech giants out there, right? So in a lot of ways, social was obviously is one example. The reason why social has now become an important element of digital marketing is because that's where the consumers are. And so therefore, if you are not there as a traditional business, then basically you really risk becoming irrelevant. So I see AI as playing a huge role, and therefore data and how organizations what they can do now necessarily, both to capture, retain, and responsibly use consumer data to provide solutions to problems that are real problems, are qualified, like Abu Bakr was saying, by the consumers, not necessarily pushed on by us, is where I see marketing generally moving towards.
Thanks, Durdana. Atifa, were you about to say something?
No, but
Okay.
if you want, I can.
No, if you so.
No, I was just basically agreeing with what Durdana was saying, and the fact that Abu Bakr has also made a very, very valid point that the customer journeys needs to be defined properly, and then the play between the offline and the online needs to be on a long-term sustainable model. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Please carry. So whilst we hear Atifa's struggle, I think Akbar, you're back. We just lost you for a little bit. So I think really what Sardar has said has been provocative. I like it.
Yeah.
Thanks you.
Yeah.
It's much needed. What we as the marketing stakeholders need to do and be aware of. I would just like to get your input, Akbar, of how you are seeing Reckitt and other FMCGs really adopting what Abu Bakr just now said.
Right. Yeah. So I think all very relevant points, but I'll go a step. I'll take a step back. So the way it works is it's all about organizational culture, and it starts from the top. If you leave it to the marketeers alone, it's not. It's we are talking about an ecosystem. The whole ecosystem needs to be transformed. It's a big transformation that the organizations have to go through. It's not one function transforming and the rest are still operating in a world where customization is not possible. So therefore, I think I think the headline is what are some of the problems that we are trying to solve in the businesses? And this is where the conversation starts from, not because what technology exists or not, and just we should just embrace the technology. The issue is what are the key challenges in the businesses? For example, how can we accelerate our penetration, our brand penetration? As simple as that. How can we increase our distribution? How can we increase our awareness scores? Some of the marketing KPIs. And then you come back and you say, okay, do we have a solution? And is that solution more efficient than what the conventional models? And if you have solutions and technology, that's where you start scanning what kind of potential vendors and the agencies are available, and then you start making a roadmap around that. What RB did was this whole digital transformation started at least 4 years back in RB. And when I say digital transformation, the big organizational transformation and not just e-commerce part of it. Where we are today is we've put up a digital hub for where we have it's a hub where all marketing programs, conventional marketing, digital marketing programs are routed through that hub, and that hub works. They are digital experts. We've done a massive upskilling across organization, whether it's a finance function or HR or sales, and it's very basic. People have been. When we speak fintech, we don't have to explain. When we say data, we don't have to explain to each other what are we talking about or how can we leverage it. People are aware of it. And then it's all about, GDPR compliances. Everyone has been trained on it. And then therefore they know, how to safeguard the consumer data. And then individual projects have started off, by each function. So there are multiple things that finance teams are doing. There are multiple work streams that supply teams are doing. So it's a overall organization which is embracing technology, digital, and finding solutions. And they're doing it not because the technology is there. It's because they find technology which can help solve the problem in an efficient way.
I think you put the finger on the pulse, Akbar, and that is what even Sardar was talking about. That it's being led from the top, and it's a total cultural change that's happened at Reckitt. So the technology is just a means to an end, but it's the mindset that has been driven from the top. And Sardar, आप यही कह रहे थे, आप यही कह रहे थे कि भाई हमें बचने चाहिए डिजिटल क्वैक से, और हमें एक कल्चर होने चाहिए हमारे इदारे के अंदर, और वो जो कल्चर है वो टॉप से आएगी.
Absolutely.
And in that culture, again, I think nothing has changed. We as marketers know that the customer has to be at this heart of everything. And I think the sooner that we start practicing this, then we can leverage what digital brings to the table. Yeah. Would you like to elaborate on that, Sardar?
Sure. No, I fully agree with Akbar. I think 2 points I'd like to make, Amir, here. Ek ye ke it sounds a little cliche, but when you're doing digital from a customer perspective, it's really, really important that the organization know what the objective is. अच्छा, अब उसकी मुराद क्या है मेरी? Some organizations want to benefit from digital through organic means. So they want a greater, wider distribution. They want to reach more customers cheaper with a higher customer satisfaction that will deliver a better result and a better bottom line, right? So that's one approach. Then there is a strategy which says, you know what, we don't want to make money off digital. We want to create separate assets, standalone assets, जिनकी अलग valuation बनेगी और उसका फायदा हम inorganically लेंगे through M&A, through mergers and acquisitions. So we will build an asset with X million customers. Even if it doesn't make money, we will then spin off a certain part of that asset to another investor, and that's where we get our money. It should be really, really key कि आप organically bottom line के लिए digital चला रहे हैं या आप inorganic value creation के लिए digital चला रहे हैं. ये अक्सर लोग कहीं बीच में ही रह जाते हैं आमिर, और वो फिर strategy के मुताबिक digital execution नहीं होती. That's number one. Number two, in the organizations, Amir, we say to people, KG, please digitize your processes. Please digitize IT, cloud pe jaएं, digitize distribution, digitize HR. If I'm sitting in HR, I've been in an organization for 20 years. Surely it crosses my mind that if I'm going to digitize my processes, I'm going to be out of a job. Is the top addressing this candidly, thoroughly with employees? Is there a, जिसे कहते हैं ना, conversations with candor? Is there a dialogue which says, you know what, certain manual repetitive skills will become redundant, will not be needed, but there will be many new opportunities that will be possible now in this digital age. And that is why upskilling is more important than any other time. So I think मैं दो पॉइंट यही आमिर, एक तो ये कि डिजिटल का जो ऑब्जेक्टिव है ना, ऑर्गेनिक ग्रोथ, बेटर कस्टमर सेटिस्फैक्शन, ग्रेटर रीच, बेटर बॉटम लाइन, वो या स्ट्रेटजी है या इनऑर्गेनिक है जिसमें आपने कस्टमर बेस एक्यूमुलेशन करनी है और आपने इनऑर्गेनिक एम&ए के थ्रू फायदा लेना. आई थिंक दैट्स इंपॉर्टेंट टू स्पेसिफाई व्हाट आर यू ट्राइंग टू अचीव. And the second is to have, honest, transparent conversations with employees who feel insecure about losing their jobs and actually showing them the benefits of upskilling. Because there has never been a time in our history where upskilling is more important than it is now.
Thank you, Sardar. I think you have totally, I think, summarized today's discussion and made the closing remarks even. We've just got a couple of minutes left before we end. There are a couple of questions that have actually come in, and let me see. We have only time for one or two. I think one of the questions that's come in is from Saima, and she is saying that other markets have extensive data available on digital consumption, data analytics, how the Facebook and other social media data is there, but it's very difficult to find that in Pakistan. And what is it that marketing association, other organizations are doing that can share this data? Very good point. I think this is something I think Akbar, Abu Bakr and other people on the panel that we should really seriously look at, of data sharing that is done either by the PAS or marketing association, and so that everybody benefits from understanding what is happening. I would totally agree that, wouldn't you?
Amir, I think there are 2 points. There is a generic level of trends, which I think the research agencies like Kantar, Ipsos, and which are public information. They can be subscribed, they can be reached, and then there are very organization-specific customer data. I think that's where the whole GDPR conversation starts off. Where it's not to be shared. It has been acquired for a certain reason with a certain consent. It has been saved.
The question that I was talking from the audience was more about generic data when you do a Google search. We do have an issue that in Pakistan, freely available data is limited. So if you don't belong to an FMCG or a large organization, and you just want to know what's the landscape like. Let's say if I were to Google right now, what's the digital consumption landscape for Pakistan, and I'm just a fintech or anybody else, it's hard to come by. So I think that's where the question was heading towards.
I agree on that point. I think that's where probably, Marketing Association of Pakistan can do something, come up with their own
Yes, so
research.
I think we have just time for that particular question. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Aisha and hear her inputs. Terribly sorry for that. I'd like to thank each one of you, Durdana, Akbar, Abu Bakr, and Atifa, for taking the time out and sharing your insights. Though we talked about digital, we experienced technical issues, but I think that is one of the things that we have to be cognizant of. But at the end of the day, I think we have kept our audience in mind, and this is what really the takeaway should be. That I think the discussions that took place today was very much keeping in mind what our audience is curious about. You very well captured your experiences in your respective industries, have given us the lots of things to think about moving forward, what we should look at it from both a government perspective, from an individual perspective, and from an organizational perspective, the culture. I think I would ask permission from Abu Bakr. I'd like to leave with the thought of, whilst we talk about digital consumption, let us beware of the digital quacks out there. Thank you, everybody, and looking forward to having more such sessions in the future. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.